I've been married for over 40 years. Can you imagine how long that is? During this time, I was able to achieve excellent results in my career, relationships, and in life in general. My family was well off, and my wife, Nicole, didn't need anything. Until I noticed strange things. My wife was unfaithful to me. But the worst thing here is how she turned it all around. And I think the terrible consequences she faced are justified. Now I'm going to tell you my story. I must admit, when I thought about what happened exactly a year ago on Monday, my skin was crawling. Nicole, my wife, showed the same interest in intimate life as I did when we both retired. She worked as a school teacher, and I worked in the transport police. Admittedly, we may not have been as passionate as rabbits, but at first, we often made love, sometimes even several times a day. However, by that Monday, a year later, the memory of our last intimate moment had sunk into oblivion. Nicole explained my obvious boredom, which led to depression and subsequent lethargy, by a lack of hobbies. Contrary to her belief, I had a different point of view. My depression stemmed from a lack of intimacy. I suspected that she might have a relationship elsewhere, and I asked a puzzling question. If she abstained, why didn't she yearn like me? And if she entered into a relationship, how and when did she succeed? On that particular Monday, she mentioned meeting Sylvia, an old school friend in town, for a cup of coffee. Skeptical, I decided to follow her. Watching them at their favorite cafe, everything seemed routine. Even later, when she returned with the groceries, the date, time, and price were scrupulously indicated on each receipt. For a former policeman, scrutinizing details was second nature. Thursday nights were crucial. She attended pottery classes while I frequented the pub. For 3 weeks, I watched her regular daily routine from a nearby pub, even catching a glimpse of her doing pottery through the window. And yet, despite the obvious evidence, doubts remained. The revelation struck on the subsequent Wednesday. Laundry day prompted Nicole to change towels weekly, alternating between blue and purple sets. Agreeing to assist, I noted the anomaly when she handed me blue towels and requested purple ones from the closet. The realization dawned. The towels were all part of a systematic change. As we dismantled the bed, my mind grappled with the unsettling notion that a white towel, not belonging to our regular bathroom set, was in the wash. This white towel, unnecessary for our usual routines, hinted at a clandestine affair, perhaps in our own home to evade suspicion. The disturbing possibility that Nicole might be concealing evidence by using these towels rather than leaving marks on the bed linen began to haunt me. March's chilly weather contradicted the presence of these white towels, which should have been stored away months ago. Could it be that she was betraying our vows within the confines of our home? The revelation felt like a heavy anvil dropping, crushing any remaining illusions. Lately, I've been enjoying peaceful sleep in our bed. However, it seems almost impossible that I wouldn't have noticed if she was engaging in intimate activities with someone right next to me. Suddenly, it hits me like a falling anvil. It's glaringly obvious that my lack of energy isn't due to depression. There's something else at play. She interrupts my thoughts, saying, "You seem lost, dear." I respond, "Oh, just working on a mental puzzle that's been bothering me." Surprisingly, things are starting to make sense now. She casually advises, "It's essential to keep your mind active," before returning to her book and finishing her coffee. I decide to keep my thoughts to myself, assuring her that my mind is indeed active. I reconstructed a possible crime scenario in my mind. The suspect, she, injects a dose of rohypnol to the victim, me, and then invites an unknown lover into the house for a secret meeting. Now everything seems so obvious. About 3 months ago, our routine changed. At about 8:50 p.m., she brings me some whiskey, and at 10:20 p.m., we take our pills, a mild sedative for her sleep, statins for my cholesterol reduction, and multivitamins for both of us. She claims that taking medications just before bedtime increases sleep efficiency. I make a mental note to examine my pills carefully when the opportunity presents itself. Wondering who she could have called to sneak into the house at this hour, I dismissed the idea that it could have been the annoying neighbor next door. The cast of characters in this mystery seems to be expanding, which necessitates more detailed information. I am Fred Brown, a former Inspector Brown before retiring 2 years ago, at the age of 60. A career setback led me to join the British Transport Police, where I served as a detective inspector for the last 5 years. Despite my efforts to stay in shape, I was overcome by lethargy. However, if my suspicions are correct, that will change soon. At 5 feet 11 inches tall, I appreciate honesty and don't like cheating. Nicole, my wife, is about 5'8" and tall, with a graceful and slender figure, small breasts, long dark hair, and green eyes. Our neighbors are an elderly couple on the right who are rarely seen, and Kimberly and the seemingly unpleasant Billy on the left. Even though Nicole insists that Billy is a wonderful person, I see him differently. Julia, who is perfect, lost her first husband to cancer, and has been living with a jerk for the last 5 years. I have a plausible theory about who, how, and where, but lack concrete evidence. The pill situation remains a mystery, but I continue to live on my own terms. On Thursday evening, Nicole, as usual, leaves for pottery classes at 18 WA and returns around 19.30. At 9.30, right after she left, I quickly grabbed a pair of needle gloves from a box in the garage. I started searching my house, not sure what exactly I was looking for. Something unusual, perhaps an element that had no place in our daily lives. We often notice inconsistencies, but when conducting a thorough investigation, even the slightest oddities, including mundane ones, can suggest a solution. My initial focus was on the pills she gave me as vitamins. Suspecting that these were sedatives prescribed to her, my suspicions were confirmed when I read the accompanying brochure, warning against alcohol consumption. The morning after I refused to take them, I felt rejuvenated. Over the next few hours, I carefully combed through every room, making sure that there were no traces of my research left. I found no obvious signs of intimacy in the guest bedrooms, clean sheets that seemed freshly ironed, although I knew they hadn't been washed recently, meaning unused. Unfortunately, there were no signs of cheating in our bedroom either, which increased my disappointment. However, the gold wrapper I found from a ribbed condom hidden in a chaise longue at the back of the house revealed the truth. It wasn't a brand I'd ever used. The realization hit me. They were having sex on the couch, using a towel to hide the evidence. She'd throw a towel in the wash and come back to our bed. My marriage, in my opinion, has been irreparably damaged. I could have initiated a divorce without proof of her infidelity, but that wasn't enough. Some form of retaliation was necessary. Despite the fact that I considered myself above pettiness, the scale of disrespect demanded an answer. I cherished a burning desire for revenge. For the next few days, I sat in silence, planning my strategy, and noticed how indifferent my wife was to my mood. Thinking about it, I found myself feeling the same apathy towards her. However, being the only bearer of information about our impending divorce, I kept up appearances every night, smiling and pretending to take pills, only to imperceptibly spit them out when she turned away. One night at midnight, disturbed by the vibration of her phone, I pretended to be asleep when she got out of bed and slipped out of our room. The sound of the linen closet door opening and closing on the landing filled the silence. Despite my bravado, I was overcome by a feeling of unease. I considered going downstairs and catching her in the act, but hesitated. I didn't want to witness the betrayal. Meeting them face to face seemed tempting, but I knew it would lead to complications. Then an idea struck me. I had a spare remote control for the home alarm system, taped under the bedside table. Expecting her to turn off the system when she went downstairs to let her lover in, I waited. After giving them a couple of minutes to get comfortable, I pressed the alarm button. The ensuing chaos echoed through the house, disrupting their love plans. Watching him hurriedly leave the house, I felt deeply satisfied. Although Nicole managed to disable the alarm, I knew that she didn't understand anything about its intricacies except arming and disarming. Later, unable to resist testing her, I asked nonchalantly, "Did you just come in?" feigning the words I would use if I were caught in a compromising situation. "I had to go downstairs to turn off the alarm," she complained. I innocently asked, "What turned it on?" She objected. "It won't work if there's no one downstairs." I suggested, "I'll go and take a look." A decisive no followed from her. She knew that trying to go downstairs in my current state would result in calling an ambulance or worse. She was smart enough to realize the possible complications. In the end, she told me that she had already turned on the alarm, checked all the doors and windows, and told me to go to bed. I complied and enjoyed a quiet weekend. Throughout the weekend, Nicole managed to keep her composure. However, during her showers, I spent anxious moments reading text messages on her phone. I had set up the lock screen with her backup passcode, knowing that their arrogance would lead to a scheduled midnight rendezvous on Tuesday. By Sunday evening, they had recovered from the trauma of Saturday night and agreed to meet on Tuesday at 11:30. This worked perfectly for my plan. I needed to talk to Kimberly first on Monday, hoping she would be working from home. Luckily, she was. "Hello, Fred," she greeted with a sweet smile as she opened the door. The smile faded when she saw my serious expression. Concerned, she inquired, "Something happened? You look so serious." "I'm sorry, but we need to talk, and we don't have much time," I replied. She agreed to meet near the library at 2:30, and I proceeded to give her a brief overview of the situation. Kimberly was shocked and expressed her frustration with Billy's actions. "How angry are you?" I asked, cautious about causing them undue pain. Kimberly agreed with the sentiment and expressed her desire to hurt them, but not excessively. I proposed a plan, and she was on board. She liked the idea of becoming victims and letting the police deal with their misdeeds. As we parted ways, I informed her that the police might ask about our last conversation, and we decided to stick to a story about a spare cable for the printer. In the following days, I spent my time alone with Kimberly, growing to appreciate her beauty, intelligence, and vindictive spirit. I shared my simple and easy-to-implement plan with her, and she agreed to think it over. On Tuesday, as I cleaned out my garage, I noticed signs that Nicole was preparing for another date at my house. I refrained from contacting Kimberly, ensuring everything appeared normal. That evening, Nicole brought me a large glass of whiskey and pills. I pretended to swallow them, ensuring my toxicology test would be consistent. By 10:30, I feigned tiredness and went to bed, preparing for the unfolding events on Tuesday. I drifted off while pondering why she felt it was acceptable to treat me this way, after nearly 4 decades and 2 children. Not only did she betray me, but she did so under our own roof, having drugged me with sedatives. It felt heartless. About 15 minutes later, I noticed her getting into bed, and I decided to feign being lifeless. After checking on me, she went to the bathroom, and I could hear the shower running. She proceeded to brush her teeth, and when I heard the toilet flush, I took the sedative I had saved earlier and continued pretending to be lifeless. At 11:30, her phone buzzed on the bedside table. I subtly snorted as if disturbed, then froze again and slowed my breathing. She left the room to answer the call, leaving her phone behind. I couldn't help but smile when her phone buzzed again, a text from Kimberly inquiring about Billy knocking on our sunroom door. I didn't have Nicole's number. I was bewildered. Soon after my phone rang, it was Kimberly. I didn't answer, indicating that I wasn't asleep. I went downstairs without alerting them, stopping near the partially open kitchen door. I overheard them engaging in intimate activities, which filled me with disgust and hatred. I questioned what I had done to deserve such treatment. If she didn't love me, she could have left, but why involve this arrogant person? I could see well enough to grab the rolling pin from the kitchen countertop. To avoid suspicion, I stood and listened until she unknowingly did me a favor by screaming for him not to stop. Seizing the opportunity, I burst into the room, yelling at him to get away from my wife. I reassured her and collapsed on top of them, pretending to lose consciousness. The drugs worked as expected, and my pretense became reality. Julia, however, continued her story. Around 10 cell, Billy brought her a drink and a vitamin tablet, as usual, exactly the same as my wife's. After taking them, she had a coughing fit in the bathroom, vomited into the sink without warning her husband. Later he disappeared, and she heard the door close. When he did not return, she called out to him, but he did not answer. Confused, she looked out of the bedroom window and saw him at the patio door overlooking our sunny room. Worried, she texted Nicole and called me, but she was ignored. Alarmed, she ventured outside and witnessed her husband's betrayal. She filmed this meeting until I intervened, perhaps drunk and mistakenly thinking that my wife had been attacked. I honestly don't remember what I was doing then, because I really wasn't myself. I hit Billy on the head, and at that moment Julia stopped filming, called the rescue service, and accurately reported the situation. At the hospital, the doctor and uniformed police explained that I might have been intoxicated. They demanded a blood test, and I felt dizzy and tired, but I knew that something had to be done. Concern for my wife dominated my thoughts. The doctor assured me that she had spoken to the police and I fell into unconsciousness again. The next time I woke up, I was in the hospital, and they were ready to take my blood for analysis. I nodded in agreement, telling the doctor vaguely, "Go ahead, do what you need to do. I have nothing to hide." As he took the sample, I reclined on the bed, drifting into sleep. The following morning, I awoke around 9 a.m. to find another uniformed officer by the door, seemingly about 20 years old. He inquired politely, "Are you okay, sir?" "I think so," I responded, "but I have no idea why I'm here. I'll let the boss explain. It's beyond my understanding." Shortly after, a nurse entered, offering me tea and toast while checking my vital signs. Meanwhile, the officer spoke quietly into his walkie-talkie, updating someone on my situation. The nurse left, promising a late breakfast, and the officer approached, stating that the boss would arrive soon for another matter. "Are you willing to wait, sir?" he asked, to which I replied with a wry smile, acknowledging the consequences of leaving. He grinned at my answer, appreciating the professionalism. Later, when we were chatting over breakfast and beer, discussing England's poor second-place performance in Australia, he mentioned that the boss would be arriving soon. In the interrogation room at the police station, I found that I had been arrested on suspicion of assault causing actual bodily harm. The investigator, introducing himself, repeated the severity of the accusation, making sure that I was aware of the possible consequences. Then he asked me to tell him about the events of the previous night. I explained mostly the facts, explaining how, feeling tired, I went to bed after my wife brought me a drink and pills. Suddenly waking up, I found that my wife was missing, and I heard a noise downstairs. Acting on impulse, I intervened, only later learning that the man I attacked was my neighbor, Mr. Billy Miller. The investigator informed me that my wife was also arrested, pinning the man to the ground as paramedics took us away. Expressing genuine offense, I questioned the investigator about Billy's identity. He revealed that Billy was my wife's lover, and they had conspired to drug both of us over the past 3 months. They had administered a prescription drug, falsely labeled as vitamins, causing potential harm. The investigation progressed, revealing collaboration between Billy and my wife in keeping us intoxicated while continuing their affair. The police found evidence of their malicious intent, charging them with poisoning and conspiracy to defraud. Both faced significant prison terms if convicted. Billy was discharged from the hospital, marking the end of a tumultuous ordeal. Off to the police station we both went, both facing investigations before the trial. My wife ended up with a 2-year sentence for abuse of office and another 2 years for conspiracy to commit fraud. Interestingly, both sentences would run concurrently. As for him, he received a 3-year sentence for malicious use. given Kimberly's liver damage and an additional 5 years for fraud. It's clear Kimberly went all out to assist the police, diligently tracking down every penny he possessed. Surprisingly, there was a silver lining for him. The prison service doctors expressed confidence that his speech would return to normal upon release. However, one could only speculate about his future employment prospects, considering the police had confiscated most of his assets under the Proceeds of Crime Act. Even his old school friends hesitated to offer him jobs involving finances. And that's not the end of it. The police acknowledged we were victims, and I wasn't charged with ABH due to being drugged by an associate of the man I was accused of attacking. I brought in old acquaintances from the national press. Kimberly and I maintained a dignified silence, feeling terribly betrayed by those we had trusted. We needed space to contemplate. The news spread with joyful frenzy. Kimberly and Billy faced relentless vilification from every corner. No commentator or talking head found any excuse for their behavior. Kimberly especially garnered sympathy for her charm, leaving everyone bewildered as to why Billy would leave her for someone else. Our 2 children attended court throughout the process. I couldn't sit with them until I testified and was released. My time on the witness stand lasted only 20 minutes, during which forensic experts presented offensive testimony, including blood tests, Kimberly's liver damage, vitamin containers, text messages, and financial due diligence. The revelations in their SMS almost admitted everything. Despite his initial belief in his cleverness, the truth surfaced in court. My daughter severed ties with her mother, writing a letter in prison, forbidding any contact due to her being the convicted poisoner. My son, deeply affected, asked if I would mind if he visited her in prison to hear her side. I advised him to go, warning him to be prepared for disappointment. A few weeks later he called, confirming his disappointment. Kimberly had blamed her actions on the influence of an idiot who had seduced her while she was vulnerable. She shifted blame, portraying herself as a victim of manipulation. Kimberly lost her dignity, reputation, husband, daughter, son, and grandchildren due to her affair with an embezzler. I divorced her during the investigation, selling the house and equitably defeating our property. She had to pay for a barrister for her defense, and I filed a personal injury claim against her for emotional trauma caused by her malicious administration. By the time of her release, she would receive her pension and not much more. Kimberly divorced Billy, who hoped for half of their house, only to realize it had been placed in trust for their twins with her first husband. She retained the right to occupy it while Billy faced an uncertain future. Kimberly and I endured public scrutiny, portraying ourselves as unfortunate victims of 2 equally despicable spouses. When the media pressure became overwhelming, I took a break in a secluded villa in the south of France. Kimberly visited a friend in a similar villa. Trust developed between us, evolving from friendship to love. Eventually, I moved in with Kimberly, and we became life partners. Our children and grandchildren formed a close bond, and Kimberly and I cherish our relationship. Starting this story with my frustration about lacking intimacy, Kimberly offered to compensate for what her husband had taken from me. The debt was paid in full during that first week in France. Kimberly proved to be a passionate partner, and I marveled at how the idiot could leave her for someone as simple as Nicole. We now take the right vitamins every night, and Kimberly stopped drinking to aid her liver's healing. I also quit, wanting to live as long as possible with her by my side. I previously mentioned Kimberly's beauty, intelligence, and vindictiveness, half-jokingly. Now it's the absolute truth. She lost her husband to cancer, raised 2 children alone, and faced betrayal, yet she can love wholeheartedly, embracing all my shortcomings. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.